As many of y'all know, Cause at its heart is more than just a place to get charmed by Charlie Wu, but a civic engagement organization. And our number one goal is to have each and every resident have their voice heard at the table. One way we could do this is through the 2022 LA mayoral race, because Garcetti may be going to India soon, and we need to focus on getting everyone to vote, especially the APA population. So from here on, I'll be passing it on to Sean on some of the basics we wanted the APA population to know.
One of the first priorities of the mayoral race is simply to let them know the dates. That means, when do they have to register by? When do they have to vote in the mail by? When will polling stations open? Even tracking down the dates for us was difficult, so spreading this relatively hard to access information to the APA community is important. We have multiple iterations of the same information that we're going to post over time just to serve as a constant reminder that these are the dates that they need to be mindful of.
Yes. And for the roles of the mayor, of course, to many people, what the mayor does may just seem like common sense, and it seems like something everyone would know, but it does help to serve as a quick reminder and as a refresher to some of those, especially for recent immigrants who may be unfamiliar with our political system.
So within the political dynamic of offices, we have the City Council, the Senate Assembly, and Congress. And City Council is a legislative body for the city that mainly oversees ordinances and other factors within the public sector. And the mayor's relationship to City Council is how they can be part of voting, propose budget plans, approve legislation, appoint city officials, and much more. And the Senate Assembly is the state legislature that works with the governor. And the mayor's relationship with the state legislatures is how cities' financial situation and capacities are highly reliant by the Senate and Assembly's decision. And now finally, Congress is the federal legislative branch that makes laws, pass bills, decides policymaking, etc. So the mayor's relationship with Congress is based on everything that includes with education, income, transportation, infrastructure, social welfare, healthcare, environmental issues, and much more, since all of these issues matter directly to local communities.
So in order to better understand the issues facing Asian Pacific American populations, we have to look at the data. This next slide shows the racial breakdown in Los Angeles City, and Asian Pacific Americans make up about 11.5% of the whole. Los Angeles has the highest population of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander residents than any other continental US city, but at just 0.1% of the total population, it's not difficult to see how their needs might be overlooked. On this next slide showing disaggregated data, we can see that there's a lot more diversity and nuance within these racial groups, and there's such a wide range of subgroups within just that small segment that was the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander population. We wanted to focus on Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders in particular because across the various subgroups, many struggle with health care inequities, educational disparities, and more. However, federal and state agencies often fail to disaggregate data that's necessary to better inform policy. Education and COVID-19 are two significant examples of how Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities struggle in comparison to other racial groups. The percent of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders that graduate college is significantly lower than the rest of the population, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders also have the highest number of COVID-19 cases per 100,000 people out of all racial groups in California. Now, after looking at the data, it's clear that Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders have diverse needs. Connecting back to the LA mayoral election, here are some recommendations on policy areas that the mayoral office should focus on in order to support a community that should be noticed and prioritized.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Lena. So we wanted to add a Los Angeles perspective on many issues because in our little mayoral race, we wanted to get residents out and voting. And to do that, we wanted to create a sense of urgency and importance on why they need to vote, especially for the APA population. So based on that, we wanted to illustrate the problems that are in LA. And no, I'm not talking about problems like if it's 99 Ranch or Ranch 99, but these are much, much bigger issues like ethnic studies or gentrification in LA Chinatown. By having a uniquely Los Angeles lens in our content, the APA population can see that these issues are affecting their everyday life as well as their neighbors, and that the mayor is crucial to erasing these barriers.
Thank you for that, Byron. For our first APA topic, I'll be tackling the importance of ethnic studies in LAUSD. To begin with a definition for ethnic studies are units of study, courses, or programs that are centered on the knowledges and perspectives of an ethnic or racial group, reflecting narratives and points of view rooted in that group's lived experiences and intellectual scholarship. Given that there has been some disinformation surrounding what ethnic studies is, we thought it was important to define what it's not. Mainly, ethnic studies is not just shaming white people for being racist or giving students a pessimistic view of society, but giving students a more well-rounded view of society that adequately reflects the history of Black BIPOC, or Black Indigenous people of color, both the good and the bad. Here are just a few examples of notable events that aren't currently being taught well enough in history curriculum, but are core to our history as BIPOC folks. The Tulsa Massacre, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and Japanese internment. Many more examples are listed below. In government policy, we've seen steady progress when it comes to making ethnic studies requirements more widespread. Most recently, the California State Board has created an ethnic studies model curriculum for high schools to adopt parts of. And the LAUSD has indicated that they will require an ethnic studies course for graduation by 2022 to 2023. I'm going to end by reiterating the importance of ethnic studies. Currently, the overwhelming dominance of Euro-American perspectives in school has led many BIPOC students to disengage from academic learning. Ethnic studies are crucial for capturing our rich and presently neglected history, and doing so has also been proven to tangibly boost academic and social outcomes for BIPOC students. It's critical that this is an issue that voters are made aware of going into the next mayoral election.
The lack of data and research has always been an issue within the APA community, but COVID-19 has re-highlighted the detrimental impact it can have. Due to the model minority myth, Asian Americans as a whole are viewed as being successful enough that data and research efforts should be focused on other groups instead. For example, the National Institute of Health reveals that in the past 10 years, less than 1% of their funding was awarded to Asian American research. And this lack of research and focus on Asian Americans has caused the severity of COVID-19 in Asian American communities to remain largely unknown, despite being possibly one of the most impacted by COVID-19 due to xenophobia and racism. And this is why it is so important for us to participate in the LA mayoral election. And the LA mayor can advocate and push for more APA data and research. And it is up to us to be aware and intentional with who will be representing us and making decisions for us.
Another topic we focused on was preserving LA Chinatown from gentrification. Now, gentrification is a big word with a lot of complicated meanings, but in short, it's an oppressive force that changes historically disinvested neighborhoods, forcing low-income residents to move with newer, more expensive real estate investment. This exact phenomenon has been occurring in Chinatown in recent times, but let's talk a little history. Chinatown used to occupy what is now the El Pueblo Los Angeles Historical Monument, but was leveled in the 1920s to develop a train station. Since then, Chinatown has flourished where it is now, but has recently been struggling with modern investments, forcing out its historical residents. Why does this matter? Well, not only are thousands of low-income immigrant residents of Chinatown being driven out of their historical and cultural home, but gentrification also destroys much of the history and culture that makes LA Chinatown so special in the first place. I think Professor Andrew Long put it best that the neighborhoods may still look like Chinatown, but are really just Disney-fied versions of the neighborhoods they once were.
We wanted to add a Los Angeles perspective of Asian hate, so we created a social media post describing some statistics of the rise in ABA hate in LA. For example, did you know that Asian hate in LA more than doubled, and in California, they have risen more than 107% from 2019 to 2020? We put some quick quotes of some of the horrible things people have heard in the streets of LA, like, your people brought coronavirus to this country, go back to your own country. We then asked our audience, what will your mayor do to stop the rise in APA hate? Will they protect our community? Will they advocate for us when others won't listen? Will they understand our struggles and resolve them? We called to them to action by asking them to vote in the upcoming election.
Hello, I'm back and here to overview our final APA issue, mental health. As a cohort, we all worked on this topic and researched a number of different perspectives together. To start, there are a number of barriers broadly faced by the APA community when it comes to mental health, extending across cultural, language, and financial barriers. Some of these include the culture of silence, dismissal, and denial towards mental health, the fact that 32.6% of Asian Americans do not speak English fluently, or that there's a massive disparity when it comes to health insurance coverage for Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Next, here are just some general statistics pertaining to mental health in the APA community. You can see the different rates of mental illness for different populations. But what is most of note is the fact that 73.1% of APA adults with mental illnesses are not getting treatment, compared to 56.7% of the overall population. This is a huge issue, as it means that the aforementioned barriers are translating into real disparities when it comes to seeking treatment. We also wanted to take the time to spotlight Southeast Asian and Pacific Islander specific issues when it comes to mental health, as both groups face distinct barriers with mental health. For Pacific Islanders, there's a lack of adequate data disaggregation that results in significant knowledge gaps regarding Pacific Islander health. For Southeast Asians, there's lots of cultural beliefs towards Western medicine characterized by skepticism and misinterpretation, further presenting a further obstacle to their underuse of mental health services. There's also some shared obstacles towards mental health care between these two groups. These include personal and cultural stigma, lower attainment rates for education, difficulties with healthcare access, PTSD from war experiences, and being unjustly burdened by the model minority myth. Tying back to our goal of educating voters on how their vote in the mayoral election can empower APA mental health, here are just a few things that the mayor's office can do. The mayor's office has the ability to propose funding for mental health programs and data collection. They can advocate for specific mental health resources, outreach, and educational programs. And the mayor's office can take the initiative to fund programs to divert nonviolent mental health related issues away from law enforcement and into the hands of specially trained community health members.
Excellent. Thank you again to the interns for all the fantastic information related to the responsibilities of the mayor's office, some of the critical dates for voting for the mayor's office, as well as issues that are critical to the Asian and Pacific American community here in Los Angeles. To that end, we want to take another few moments here to pause and offer an opportunity for the audience to, once again, ask our interns any questions that they might have that the presentation may have brought to the table. We do have a question, a comment in the Q&A here. Attendee noted, would definitely recommend checking out the CCED LA Chinatown Community for Equitable Development to help with direct actions or other ways to support. There is a question from Dan Schnur in our chat. All of these are critical issues, great work. But if you had to choose just one, which would it be, interns?
I think that's a really tough question to ask. If I had to give an answer right now, I would say it is the anti-Asian violence, because it is the topic that is most directly threatening the lives and safety of our community members. And I think you can see how it impacts like the mental health and like almost like everyday existence of so many like so many of us, you know, like having to fear for ourselves being around and going outside. And I think that it is like a issue that has only been most recently blown to the proportions that it has, and I think it has to be the most quickly and most significantly addressed because of that.
In my opinion, I think that mental health is most important, but I'd say for the opposite reason of API hate. API hate is all over the news, and just ask anyone on the street and they can talk to you about it. But mental health, no one talks about it in our families and our communities. It's hidden, and it needs to be talked about more, and the message needs to be spread. And I'd say if there was one issue that we had to focus on for the entire 9 weeks, I'd say I would have worked on mental health because it's so heavily stigmatized.
Fantastic questions and even better answers. I appreciate everyone for participating. So to keep our presentation moving along, I want to thank everyone for jumping in with the questions, but we will go ahead and pass it back to Byron to close us out.
Yes, thank you for the questions. Let's go ahead and put this in. So, in summary, we've all done so much in the past 9 weeks. We've done networking, we've gained professional skills, we've understood the issues that affected our community and improved our teamwork abilities. And energy upgrade, we focus on our own stories on how we do sustainability in our own way. And rather than having our habits labeled as just as an immigrant thing, it is now an environmental thing. And the mayoral election, we focus on spreading basic information so that people get a foundational understanding of what to do and how the mayor impacts the APA community. Then we analyze APA issues and how that works in a Los Angeles lens. So this work was very empowering for us because of just how much new knowledge and skills that we gained. And we hope that you were empowered by it too, but don't use too much power because you gotta save energy. Ahaha. Excuse us for the terrible jokes. But that is the end of our presentation. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We wanted to give a thanks to Steve, Justine, Nancy, Talia, and Farah, and to the countless others who have offered their time, energy, mentorship, and panelists. You've seen us grown from awkward, quiet networkers to great advocates, and we're so grateful to you. And we are proud of the work we have done, and we hope that someday in the future, you can see how successful we'll be, and you can say, hey, I remember when they were just TikTok stars in college. So you can actually see many of our posts on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So if you see them, give them a like and comment, beat the algorithm, and help our advocacy reach more eyes and ears. Thank you, and I'll be putting it back to Steve.